You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. Today, in the state capital of Mississippi, a number of organizations came together, led by Jay-Z's philanthropic arm, Team Rock, as well as the Mississippi Prison Reform Coalition, the Poor People's Campaign, in addition to rapper Yo Gotti and the advocacy group Until Freedom. They were protesting prison conditions in the state of Mississippi, specifically the Parchman Prison, where a number of inmates, now upwards of a dozen, have died as a result of conditions in those prisons. Joining us right now is Tamika Mallory. She is the co-founder of Until Freedom. She is there in Mississippi. Tamika, glad to have you back on Roland Martin Unfiltered.
Thank you so much for having me on, Roland, and thank you so much for covering this issue. We can always count on you.
So this has just been crazy. I was on social media earlier and I saw a story that said 2 more prisoners have died. And what's interesting is the governor there, 3 more. Okay, the governor there is blaming the prisoners as if the conditions in the prison are just fine and just hunky-dory.
Right. Well, what he's trying to do is connect the deaths that are happening in the prison solely with gang violence. He is trying to really exclude the government from responsibility and sort of absorb themselves of any responsibility in this whole situation. There had been a point where in Parchman, while the conditions were still bad, there were not people dying at the numbers that we see. But the conditions there have grown worse. Obviously, it's the winter months. There's been moments, a lot of times, when the prison has been very cold, when the food has not been served as it should. And as the conditions begin to deteriorate even more, it has created tension. Whenever you put individuals in an inhumane situation, you're going to see violence spark. You're going to see suicide and other issues come up. And so what the local community organizers here have been saying is that we're not asking for everyone to be released, although they do believe that Parchman, the prison, needs to be closed down. And we can talk about the history of that later. However, what we're saying is that while people are doing their time, they should not have rats running around, running on them. Actually, we've seen video footage of 3, 4, 5 rats running around at one time in a particular closed area. We've seen roaches. We've seen the mold. We've seen the water. The water in itself, as we know in Flint, Michigan, and other places where there's dirty water, has the ability to create mental issues. And the water in Parchman is browner than my skin. And so as the conditions have continued to deteriorate, they've been bad for years, but they've gotten worse. It has also created a situation where violence has begun to rise. You have a situation where 80% of the guards, the correction officers in an all-male prison are women. So that has created a particular dynamic. And we know that the staff there is very, very underpaid. There has not been any renewed money and budgets put into the prisons here across the entire state of Mississippi in too many years. So there are a lot of factors, and the governor is being extremely irresponsible by trying to really reduce it to an issue of gang violence rather than having a conversation about the entire picture.
Again, 5 people have died since Saturday. 1 man committed suicide. 10 total. 8 of them have taken place in Parchman, and that has been in the last 3 weeks there. Again, the governor has certainly complained about these inmates having cell phones, but the reality is this here. If it was not for cell phones being snuck into these prisons, we would not be able to see
Right.
visually what is happening. It would sort of be a he said, she said.
Right.
But the state cannot deny the reality when you see inmates sloshing through water, when you see them, as you said, showing the rats. When you
Right.
see them showing those conditions. And so the governor seems to be, and again, the governor we're talking about here is Tate Reeves, who recently took over.
Yeah.
He is more angry because they're actually showing what happened as opposed to what the conditions actually are.
Absolutely. I mean, he's talking about the cell phones being contraband, which, by the way, the issue with how the phones are getting in has not come up. He hasn't even talked about how the contraband is making it in the jail. Today, at the rally that we held, where hundreds of people showed up to call for the issues in Parchman to be addressed, there was one woman who spoke about the 3-inch glass that you have to speak through to visit your loved one. So we're not talking about civilians bringing contraband into the jail. We're talking about people who work for the prison system bringing this contraband, as he says, into the jail. But he continues to say that these cell phones have contributed to the violence and the conditions. I'm not sure how a cell phone goes to mold and dirty water. If somebody else can help me understand that, maybe Roland, you're smarter than me, tell me how that happens. But what we do know is that those cell phones have really been the thing that enabled and helped and assisted whistleblowers, because that's what these guys are right now. With the retaliation that we know is happening, we have seen video footage of the officers doing the shakedowns, coming in to find the cell phones, and also just retaliating against these guys in general, because we know that systems do not like to be exposed. But these men are putting themselves on the line. And where they say that some people are committing suicide, I believe that that probably is true in some of these situations. But what we know from one family particularly is that the proper autopsies have not even been done. The proper procedures are not even being done on those people who have died, which the local folks here with family members and otherwise say that there have been more than 20 deaths that have taken place since all of this has been happening. So the news is reporting one thing, but the local folks are saying there's been many, many more deaths. So this situation is an epic humanitarian crisis. That is what we're dealing with. We just saw a video today of someone who showed that the jail is dark. So you have men inside of a prison that is dark, which can also contribute to a real challenge mentally. So this is a real serious situation. And we're saying that everybody, because Parchman is Roland. Parchman is all over Texas, Indiana. It's in California. It's even in New York, where we had to do work at the Brooklyn facility, MDC, where they didn't have lights and heat during this time last winter. It's everywhere, and we feel everyone should be paying attention and helping in any way that you can.
I am reading a tweet here. This is from was posted about 6 minutes ago by someone going by the name Lizzie Mag, Lizzie Mag 58. Excuse me. My loved one got a staph infection and other skin disorders at Parchman Prison, sleeping on a rusted metal rack, no mat, bathing in rust-colored water. Where are the feds we have asked you for? And she was tweeting Donald Trump. You, of course, are familiar with protesting what's happening in jails or prisons in the state of New York. We remember when there was no heat in the jail there, and you had inmates who were freezing and were complaining and yelling and screaming about the cold temperatures there. Is it part of the problem also we're dealing with a society in this country who frankly doesn't give a damn about folks who are locked up, who believes that how they're being treated is just, and that, you know what, throw the key away, lock them up, throw the key away. Who cares how they feel and what they think?
There's certainly an element of that, and it's a very dangerous narrative. I mean, first of all, we have to acknowledge the fact that everyone that's in prison is not a violent offender. And even in those cases, we don't know all of the stories. We also know, because we have seen the exonerations of people like the Central Park Five and other situations where we see people who've served 20 and 30 years being returned to society after being exonerated for crimes that they did not commit. So inside of prisons, we have a diverse group of people, some who've been wrongfully convicted, others who have not necessarily committed crimes that would really equal the amount of time that they've received. If we had time today on this program, this show, on your show, to really talk about some of the sentencing laws here in Mississippi that have allowed people to do 30 and 40 years for low-level marijuana issues and other very low-level offenses, it means that the standard of humane treatment must be at least at a balanced level, so that no matter what the situation is, everyone who is inside of a prison is able to live there at least in a humane situation. Doesn't mean open up the doors. While we do believe that people who are eligible for parole should be allowed to go home, we believe that the governor has the ability to commute sentences for people who are elderly and folks who may have illness, different issues that they're dealing with, health issues that they're dealing with. So we do think that the governor ought to be working on doing those things to bring the overcrowding in the prisons here in Mississippi down. But nonetheless, the standard for living should at least be humane. We're not looking for them to roll out the red carpet inside of the prison, but however, there should at least be clean water. And the last thing I'll say on that, with this issue of throw away the key, lock people up, Parchman is literally sitting on a plantation. At the end, when slavery ended, that was a plantation during the time that people were slaves here in Mississippi. This particular area in Parchman, it was an actual plantation. And when slavery ended, the plantation closed and they opened a prison. And so this that we're talking about, this facility that we're talking about, is actually sitting on a plantation. So when we say lock the doors and throw away the key, what we're talking about is leaving people in a continuous state of being enslaved. And it is an issue that has to be addressed at the highest level of government in this country. We cannot celebrate King Day and be hypocrites who say we love Dr. King and not follow what he did when he went into jails and into the valleys of our communities to lift our people from the bottom.
But Tamika, right now I want to play. This is a video that we just pulled from. We don't have it. Okay, I thought we had it there. Again, the governor. What's next? You had this big protest out there. In terms of what's the next actionable steps?
So our goal here has really been to support the local groups who are on the ground. They have a local list of demands. They are applying pressure. And I think what we did today is show that there is an escalated level of pressure that is going to be applied from the local community, getting them organized. However, there are petitions. You can go to the Color of Change website right now, Color of Change website, and find the petition to shut down Parchman and also to fix some of the issues there. And as I said, the Mississippi Prison Reform Coalition, you can also find them on Facebook, where there are a list of demands and things that you can be pushing the local elected officials to do right at this moment. We're going to continue to organize. We're going to continue to bring people here and to hold different demonstrations and sit-ins and other opportunities for the governor and all of the elected officials who are in this area to hear from us, to keep putting pressure on this local government. And also, we know that that Team Rock Nation, Jay-Z's organization, along with Yo Gotti and a number of other individuals, are in the process of filing a lawsuit to try to get some relief, some immediate and emergency relief. So we ask people to continue to watch that and do what you can to help promote and push when the different steps are happening.
You see the phone number there for Parchman Superintendent. You can call 662-745-6611, extension 2301. Again, 662 745-6611, extension 2301. And the main line to the Mississippi Department of Corrections is 601-359-5600, 601-359-5600 to the control room. Also, please pull me up the phone number to the governor's office because folks need to hear, need to let him know how they feel as well. Before I let you go, Tamika, here is the governor speaking to this issue a few hours ago.
By using the managed access system to prevent contraband cell phones from being used in all of Parchman's housing units. These phones have been illegal for years, but they've been snuck in, and they're being used to coordinate gang activity throughout the Mississippi system and even throughout the country. That was a large part of what caused the recent series of killings to escalate as much as it did. It's a real problem, and it's got to be taken seriously to save lives. We want to make sure that corrections officers are not creating more problems than they solve. The vast majority of officers are doing difficult work for far too little pay.
I could not hear, I don't know if you heard him as well, Tamika. But the reality is the governor of Mississippi is responding the same way as other governors of Mississippi have responded to these type of issues, a pretty much callous response. And as somebody who is from Texas, who is familiar with the fact that Texas prisons were under a federal jurisdiction really for more than 20 years, this is where historically folks have looked to the federal government. But you've got an administration now, a Department of Justice doesn't give a damn about regular people, certainly backs up law enforcement at any time. Mississippi is a red state. And so, and then, of course, you look at Trump appointing these right-wing federal judges. This is where I keep trying to explain to people why elections matter, who we put in office, because you would hopefully you would have a sympathetic federal judges who care about the conditions in these prisons. With the existing administration and who they're appointing, that is likely not the case.
That's right. No, absolutely. I mean, I've been telling folks that while we talk about the First Step Act, and I think it's good work to ensure that people are able to leave prison, while they're doing that and sort of letting people out the front door, they're sending people to prison and also treating them less than human by the millions, literally in this country, through the back doors, because the federal judges that have been put in place are not people who look at rehabilitation as a real necessity. And also, these are not folks who are looking at ulterior ways or different ways, rather, to deal with issues in our communities. They're not looking for, different options and ways to help really get our people on their feet and really get them back into society. And so there's a lot of work to be done. I think one of the demands certainly is to have the federal government look at this issue. However, I have no confidence whatsoever that the federal government is going to intervene in a way that is helpful. What you hear Governor Reeves doing when he keeps talking about the cell phone, the contraband, he is trying to make an excuse and really give way for officers to be able to go into the jails and beat these men and again retaliate against them for putting the information out. What he should be saying is that he's glad, as the governor of this state, the new governor of this state, that he had an opportunity to see for himself what is happening in the prisons and that there is real work that has to be done.
All right. Rukia Lumumba, Executive Director of the People's Advocacy Institute, who is there as well. She and others are promising they will continue and that there's going to be another protest taking place at the state capitol on Monday. Tamika Mallory, co-founder of Until Freedom. We appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
All right, I want to go to my panel there in D.C. Melik Abdul, Republican strategist. Pam Key, she's an attorney and activist. Along Victoria Burke, writer with NNPA. Melik, I'll start with you. This is your home state. Are you satisfied with the response that you're seeing from the governor and state officials to the inhumane conditions in these prisons, and also the fact that nearly a dozen inmates have now died in a little more than a month?
No, I'm not. I mean, and it's hard for anyone to make the argument that they're satisfied with what we're seeing just because of the videos. A lot of the footage that we've seen about Parchman. And what people should know is that Parchman actually started as a penal farm. It was following the South Carolina model for penal farms and for black people, obviously. And, you know, maybe later, I think maybe about 20 or so years later, it started actually getting white people in there. But, you know, it's the facilities are, you know, decrepit. You know, we've seen videos of that. I think the facility probably was built in maybe 1901 or something. But I agree with what Tamika said about, you know, Parchman, unfortunately, is just an example of what we see in areas all around the country. You know, of course, the governor is going to try to save his butt. But when you have the conditions that we see, like for me personally, seeing one mouse rat is enough in any space. So the idea that you're in a space with the plumbing conditions, and we know there are many instances where I'm pretty sure that lead, the building is so old, I'm pretty sure there are issues with lead contamination and all sorts of things. So that really doesn't surprise me as far as just the people who are pushing back against it. You know, I'm happy that Jay-Z is interested, involved in it. I hope that this actually starts a movement where we're looking at similar places all around the country because, as again, unfortunately, this is not just limited to Parchman, but this is something that, you know, maybe in an election year, it could actually be helpful to have people like Jay-Z out there. You know, there's a Senate race that's going to be coming up with Senator Hyde-Smith, between Senator Hyde-Smith and Mike Espy. So this is something that can really get people to the polls. And I think that people, irrespective, you know, and we should be clear that, you know, not every person who's at Parchman is black. So white people who are at Parchman are subjected to the same conditions. So this is something that everyone should care about, not just because you may care about black people, but because you care about the humane treatment of individuals, period.
Of course, the last time, Pam, we had discussed this issue on Roland Martin Unfiltered, we actually had a white woman who was the mother of a man who was in one of those prisons.
Oh, wow.
When you look at, again, this response, I mean, I'm sorry, this pretty much callous response, Pam, to, I mean, 10 inmates have died. Right. The latest one committed suicide. There are people who are saying they cannot tolerate these conditions, and they would rather take their own life than deal with that. That should be troubling.
Right. Roland, I want to make two important points here. First of all, from a legal perspective, when a person is put into custody or state custody, the state has full command and control over their lives, and there is a responsibility to put them in humane conditions. That has been established by the Supreme Court over and over again. We inherited an attitude towards criminals from our English ancestors that threw people in the bottom of a hole and hoped their families fed them, and if they didn't, they just starved to death. Well, over the years, we found that we didn't want to repeat the mistake that was made in the English penal system because it was inhumane and it had no rehabilitative ability whatsoever. So point number one is it is the responsibility of the taxpayers of the state of Mississippi to make sure that all of their prisons are in humane conditions. But I want to make another point, and your guest didn't really touch on this, but I have seen on social media in several places, you can't take it all 100% gospel truth, but I've seen a lot about groups of inmates being pitted against each other and correctional officers sort of egging on, allowing, or even spurring violence against inmates or between inmates, and that having low lighting, bad conditions, dirty water, that kind of thing exacerbates the fear and the mental stress and the mental agony of being confined that way. So when you add fear of being attacked or raped or hurt in prison on top of being cold, underfed, or having low lighting, and then on top of that, the despair of not being paid attention to and nobody caring, that's when you start to get suicidal conditions. That's when it starts to get so bleak that people feel like that death is their best option. We're seeing sort of the perfect storm coming together in these prison facilities. And it is up to the, 37% of Mississippi's voting population is black. They need to stand up and they need to show up at those polls to vote in people who will take this seriously.
Lauren.
Yeah, and the first thing Malik touched on it is that this has to be an issue at the ballot box. It has to be something that Mike Espy brings up and his opponent brings up as a political issue. Unfortunately, Mississippi is a particular state that has a legacy of this type of thing. It's not really all that shocking that Tate Reeves, who is an accountant, is out there doing another sort of Ross Barnett routine that Mississippi is known for. It's embarrassing. I mean, what can you say? I mean, I'm surprised the UN or somebody hasn't come in and talked about some sort of human rights violation. But the state of Mississippi is like 50th in health care, and the per capita income is only $23,000. None of this is particularly surprising. And it shouldn't take Jay-Z and a bunch of entertainers coming in to bring attention to something that is a human rights violation, effectively. So it's embarrassing. What can you say? It's like, we talk about these other countries, once again, Russia and Venezuela and all these other places that have really bad prison conditions, but obviously Rikers and Parchman are rivaling that. Obviously, Parchman has got a historic legacy of this that goes back to, if you remember, obviously the Freedom Riders were brought to Parchman, and here we are 60 years later still talking about Parchman Prison. So until somebody gets serious, and I doubt that the group that will get serious is the group that we're looking at now that's in power in Mississippi, we'll be talking about this again at some point soon.
Well, we certainly are going to continue talking about this here, certainly elevating the folks who are there protesting, and so we certainly appreciate the work that they're doing to make this issue real. All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment. Congressional Black Caucus has put out an emergency call for national African American leadership. They'll be holding a summit February 3rd and February 4th in the nation's capital. On February 3rd, it will take place at the Hyatt Hotel in Washington, D.C. On February 4th, it will take place on Capitol Hill. A number of workshops and sessions are planned. It is all focused on the 2020 election, the Democratic primary, but also the fall election, as well as the U.S. Census, which is taking place. And so if you go to this website for more information, cbc.house.gov/2020, cbc.house.gov/2020 for more information. Now back to your Roland Martin Unfiltered video.